Now that we've got WrestleMania, the arcade game, and In Your House out the way, it's time to take a look at the next game that came out for the system, and that's WWF Warzone. As the times began to change and the fight for TV ratings were at its highest, WWF were pulling out all the stops to gain the ratings to beat its competition at the time, WCW. The quality of the TV programming changed drastically. Quickly gone were the goofy gimmicks that appeared from the previous era and were now replaced by more edgier characters to appeal to a more mature age. We got some of the greatest moments in wrestling history around that time, now dubbed the Attitude Era. WWF became a lot more violent. It also had a lot of comedic value, with some wrestlers playing the roles of pimps, porn stars, and being very stereotypical, which might not have aged well now, but it definitely still makes me laugh when I rewatch it. While the product at the time had its comedy moments, it also had wrestlers that made it a legit sport. At the time, the product had a really nice balance, which I'm sure had a bit of everything for viewers and fans at the time. Development for Warzone began almost immediately after the release of In Your House, and it was published yet again by Acclaim, released in July of 1998 for the PlayStation 1. During the development of this game, it was going by the name of WWF 98, but of course was later dropped for Warzone, which when you think of it, they were ahead of their time back then naming it WWF 98, when all current wrestling games are named after the year they came out. This game would be drastically different from the two previous games I've covered. Definitely going in the right direction, but maybe not mastering it, but we'll get into that in a bit. And our WWF Intercontinental Champion at the time of this game's release was The Rock, and our WWF Champion at the time was the Rattlesnake himself, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Upon starting the game, you're greeted with a great intro, much like the intro to their television program Raw at the time, showcasing all the playable characters in the game. And what an intro this is. Like I said in part 1, it wouldn't be until 1998 where I'd become a full-time fan, so this was definitely my era. I must say, for those who may not know, every Monday night from January 1993, WWF aired their televised episodes of Monday Night Raw. Back then they would split the show up into two halves, the first half just being called Raw, where you'd get some mid-card matches and a lot of promo stuff. Then halfway through the program, Warzone would begin, and that's when the shit would hit the fan with a lot more edgier content. Although I don't watch much or keep up to date with wrestling now, it's good to see Raw still going strong to this day. Once on the main menu, there's a number of things you can select, but at this moment we're going to take a look at Career Mode, or Challenge Mode as the game calls it. You pick a wrestler from a somewhat decent sized roster for its time. I don't know, but I find the selection here a bit weird. Like for example, Bret Hart is still a playable character in this, even though he left the year before to go to WCW. Mosh and Thrasher? Where's the Road Dogg and Badass Billy Gunn of the New Age Outlaws? British Bulldog? He left the same time as Bret Hart to go to WCW, so why is he in this? I wish we could have had Savio Vega or Too Cold Scorpio as playable characters instead. Same goes for Ahmed Johnson too. He left at the start of 1998, but I suppose it may have been a bit too late to take him out by that point. I guess it is what it is. You definitely get some of the best wrestlers WWF had at the time, with the likes of The Undertaker, Kane, Triple H, The Rock, Shawn Michaels, although he was out of action at the time, but we'll let that slide. WWF games would come out on a yearly basis, but they would always be a year behind, so really it reflects what 1997 was like and not 1998. This would be a common theme with all wrestling games from this point. Anyway, once you have selected your wrestler for challenge mode, you're shown a tower of opponents you'll be facing, resembling a lot like Mortal Kombat, but this isn't like the other games I've covered in part 1. This is actually a proper wrestling game. Yes, gone are the fast-paced, over-the-top, unrealistic fighting games. We finally get a wrestling game that's about chaining moves together and actually being able to pin your opponent at any time during a match, not just the end after you've drained your opponent's health. I will say this before I get into the controls for this game. I customise mine to what you see on screen, so if what I'm describing to you doesn't seem familiar, that is why. Before entering a match, you get this cool poster showing who your opponent is. It resembles to what you would have seen on Raw at the time before matches, which is a nice touch. We finally get entrances too, with the superstars' music also. Not much to today's standards, but I'm sure it was mind blowing at the time, but you're also getting a glimpse of what you're going to be dealing with when it comes to gameplay. This WWF game would be the first of its kind in regards to using 3D models for the characters. No more digitization like the previous games. They got two unknown wrestlers at the time to provide the motion capture for moves in this. those two unknown wrestlers being Matt and Jeff Hardy, way before they'd get into the main card for TV programming. And boom, the match begins. And everything that's been great leading up to this moment all of a sudden becomes overshadowed by the gameplay, and not in a great way. I mapped out X button for kick, square for punch, triangle for run, R2 to climb the ropes, and circle for a tie-up to initiate grapple moves, and let's talk about that. When tying up to do a grapple maneuver, from there you have to input a series of button commands to pull off a single move, and that goes for almost everything. For the first maybe hour or so of playing, you'll be constantly pressing start, going to the moves list option to see what you can pull off from the current position you're in. Like I said in part 1, I played these games almost backwards from their initial release, so when I eventually played this it felt like such a step backwards, which I know it was a couple of years old at the time of me playing it, but I didn't think things could be so dated so quickly. I remember seeing it in my local game shop after playing the first SmackDown. I asked my mum if I could get it and she looked at the box, and I could just tell from that it was nothing compared to the SmackDown game I was so used to playing. I thought to myself though, it's got Stone Cold on the front cover, so it must be amazing. I think that was the first time I had felt what disappointment feels like. It's not all doom and gloom though. In terms of going forward for the time, it was a huge step in the right direction, moving away from the gameplay of the previous two games I covered in part 1. Once I got the feel of the controls down and refamiliarised myself with how it all works, I kind of had a good time with it, to be honest. One thing that did annoy me though was the fact I didn't see one finisher the whole time I was playing challenge mode. To pull off a finisher you have to drain your opponent's meter and then you're granted with a finisher. But what's the point waiting to go through all that when you can pin your opponent for the win when their meter gets to red? Pinning your opponent is not the only way you can win matches. You can also win by submission, but I didn't use it for any of my wins, but it's a nice addition to the series. There is also a stun meter. After you drain the bar of your opponent, it changes colour. They go into a stunned state, giving you free reign to pull off whatever move your wrestler has in his arsenal. The fans play a big part in this too. They'll let you know if you're stinking the joint out by booing if you keep pulling off the same moves and shout stuff like this.
Into a frenzy. Lockhorn. Farouk is trying to get to his feet.
If you pull off a good combination of different moves, the crowd cheer and it actually almost does double the damage to your opponent. And also, going back to the life bar for a minute, there's so many colours it has to change before going deep red and being drained completely that it sort of drags matches out a bit, almost overstaying their welcome. It also doesn't help that their damage bar can slowly refill if they start building momentum by pulling off moves themselves. The hit detection can be a bit off too. There's times you and your opponent can be flying about the ring trying to pull off a move, but the game can't decide who got in first, so you're both just sort of flying all over the place. You also have commentary done by Vince McMahon and good old JR, who'll occasionally just chat the most shit during a match, but before a match they'll blow smoke up the superstars' arses. Check this out.
Say what you want about Shawn Michaels' attitude, he can still get it done.
Shawn Michaels may be cocky, but he can back it up.
The ring's about to become a mosh pit.
He may not be high class, but he sure can kick ass.
Triple H is the only true blue blood in the WWF.
As obnoxious as he is, he can get the job done.
Here comes Ahmed Johnson, the man from Pearl River, Mississippi.
He is awesome, just awesome.
You'll also hear superstars say some of their catchphrases during a match. Check out Stone Cold Steve Austin talking smack to Mankind.
There's only one way to win this one. You gotta climb over the top.
Don't take his ass whipping personally, son.
Gotta love that. So back to how the challenge mode works. You make your way up this tower of opponents and you'd think your end goal would be the WWF title, yes? Well, it kind of is, but it's overshadowed by this groupie. It almost comes across like you're working your way up to get a piece of that poontang pie off of this woman. After getting a couple of wins under your belt, this woman will pop up in a cutscene and appear to show great interest in you.
I saw your win tonight. Very impressive. I've got my eyes on you.
Who, me? After the occasional win, she'll continue to pop up in cutscenes showing even more interest in you until you eventually win the last match, win the WWF title belt, and seal the deal with her. Come on baby, let's go get wet. Can you stand the rain? Can you stand the rain, baby? Go on, Kane, you absolute lad. Along with the challenge mode, you have the normal versus mode that is a simple one-on-one match. You choose the superstar you want to play as and your opponent. Oh, wait, you don't actually. The game chooses for you. I just wanted a match against Triple H, but Ahmed Johnson will do, I guess. I wonder why they decided it would be a good idea to choose for you. You also have tag matches, which a lot like versus mode, you choose who you want to play as, but your opponents are picked for you. I had a funny experience playing this match. I started the match as Shawn Michaels and wanted to tag Triple H, so went over to the corner for the tag. I wasn't sure what button to press, and then this happened. You see, I wasn't too sure if the tag was made, so I'm still focusing playing as Shawn Michaels, and at the corner of my eye I noticed Triple H, wondering what the hell he was doing. While Shawn Michaels was getting the shit kicked out of him, I realised I was controlling Triple H the whole time. Then the match just turned to chaos, staying true to what we would see on the TV programming at the time. Really enjoyed this match actually, to be honest. Another match you can choose is the steel cage match. It's pretty basic, just a cage surrounding the ring, and the way to win the match is by escaping over the top, which took me ages to do. I had Mankind in a stunned state, pardon the pun, on countless occasions, and whenever I got to the top, Stone Cold would just stand there. I eventually figured out how to escape by button bashing. Also, why did they remove the ropes for this match? I thought my game was broke whenever I attempted to get some momentum by running against the ropes until I realised they weren't there. Anyway, next up is a weapons match. Much like the standard one-on-one but with weapons thrown into the mix. Couldn't beat a hardcore match back in the day. The Nintendo 64 version of the game would actually include some extra match types like a gauntlet match and the Royal Rumble. So if you're looking for the total package, faster loading times, and don't mind the audio quality being sacrificed, then the Nintendo 64 version might be the one for you. I tell you, with all the new match types we got, a proper career mode, the bonus content didn't stop there. This was the first WWF game for the system where we'd finally be able to create our own wrestler. It's fairly basic, but a step in the right direction for what we'd see later on down the line for created wrestler content. You can create whatever you want with what's available, go for something completely original, or even go as far as to create wrestlers not in the game like Vader, like I have done here. Additional content would include wrestlers' biographies, detailing where they are from, finishing moves, height, weight, etc. But here's something I don't understand. Representing their stats with chain links. Like, can you imagine Howard Finkel saying this?
The following contest is for the WWF Championship. Making his way to the ring with a toughness of 5.5 chain links, Mankind!
If you view their bios again by going through left or right, they appear with alternative outfits, which Kane's kinda caught me off guard a bit. This game came out in 1998, but I'm sure we wouldn't see this alternative outfit until 1999 if my memory serves me correctly. If so, it's pretty cool that they must have had this planned almost a year in advance to change up his costume for the TV episodes later on down the line. But it also reminded me of alternative costumes I'd rather forget. And by the way, I'm saving the best thing for last. When going through challenge mode, you'll sometimes have what the game calls grudge matches. It's when a wrestler has a problem with you and will invite you to a match, but it's not as basic as getting thrown into the match right away. Oh no, a video will pop up with them talking smack to you. Some are really well done, like Shawn Michaels.
If you want a piece of me, the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels, I ain't too hard to find. I'm the good-looking one standing behind his army. I'm 1,000,000 strong. Around here, everyone thinks they can knock me and the clique off the top of the ladder. Take your best shot, Jackson, because believe me, it ain't gonna be enough.
Or Stone Cold Steve Austin.
People ask me what Austin 316 means. You're fixing to find out firsthand, son. It's gonna be a cold day in hell before I lose to a piece of trash like you, and that's the bottom line because Stone Cold said so.
These guys just have a natural talent when in front of a camera, but others seemed rushed. Like, look at the British Bulldog here. He's clearly reading the script while on camera.
You're the piece of the trash of the World Wrestling Federation. Could never be the championship material that I am. If you think you've got what it takes to put the choke chain on the British Bulldog, then think again. When I get through with you, there better be enough of you to scrape off the floor when you feel the wrath of the Bulldog.
Or Farouk. He couldn't look more disinterested if he tried.
So you put me down. Big deal. I've been beat before, brother. And there ain't no way you're gonna do it twice.
But the best by far goes to Ahmed Johnson. I cannot understand a word he is saying. Check this out.
Listen up, punk. That little ass body of yours can possibly deal with the ass whipping I'm going to give you in the ring. If you want to step up to play T, bring it on. Because I forgot to take my medication in the morning and I'm in a real bad mood.
This guy is far too intense.
Those other stars, they're a pushover. But now, you're fucking ready to get the big dog. Because if you're dumb enough to believe you got what it takes to take on Ahmed Johnson and a verbal powerhouse, then come on, you step right up, baby, and I guarantee you won't be going home.
The game was received very well, mostly praised for its graphics and the package as a whole with all the additional content you got with it, like extra match types, create a wrestler. People do fail to realise that when this game came out it really was the greatest of its kind, and I'm sure I would have too. Often compared to the games later in the series, but in comparison, that's really not fair. Yeah, it might not be as easy to just pick up and play as the games later in the series would be, but get a wrestler you like and memorise his move list, and you never know, you might enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it when I was a kid, hugely due to the fact I was playing SmackDown a lot, but now that I've played this at an older age I can appreciate how innovative this game was back then, and how it set the foundation for WWF games to come. It did also have a version for the Game Boy, but the less said about that the better. As I said, it was praised highly for all things mentioned, but what the fans couldn't wait for the most was the next game to come out for the series. So here it is. Let's have a look at WWF Attitude. WWF Attitude was released in July of 1999. Developed and published by Acclaim, and this would be Acclaim's last kick of the ball at making a WWF title before THQ got their hands on the rights. There isn't much to say when it comes to the making of this game. The team behind this consisted of 20 people, 10 of which worked on the PlayStation version and the other 10 worked on the Nintendo 64 version. Trying to cash in on the success of Warzone, they decided to get WWF Attitude out to the masses as soon as possible before they lost the rights. Even though it took less than a year to make, they didn't just do a simple copy and paste job from Warzone. We got treated to a lot of extra features which I'll get into in a bit. And our Intercontinental Champion at the time of this game's release was D'Lo Brown, and our WWF Champion was Stone Cold Steve Austin. Once again having a great video package put together for the intro to get you in the mood. This was the peak of the Attitude Era for me. Also worth noting, this game was actually dedicated to Owen Hart, who had tragically lost his life in a stunt gone wrong. The team didn't have enough time to take Owen Hart or his likeness out of the game, so added this onto the end of the video package to show respect. The name Attitude comes from that period in WWF where they were pulling out all the stops. I tell you, if you watch any wrestling from that period and compare it to today's stuff, it's massively different. Once on the main menu, you might be slightly overwhelmed compared to the previous game. It's nicely laid out and easy to navigate with a lot of options to choose from. We'll take a look at the game's season mode for the time being and come back later to the other content that's available. Now you're on the character selection screen, and holy hell, this is what you call a proper roster of superstars to choose from. You have almost everyone here from that time period, a massive improvement from the previous game. There are a total of 30 superstars to choose from, making it the largest selection of superstars to choose from that time. Once you have picked your wrestler, you're brought to the main career mode hub, a calendar detailing what shows are coming up and what title you're fighting for. On the right hand side of the screen you have a ranking system which lets you know what your current rank is. You move up the ranks by competing and winning matches. When you're first in the rankings for the title you're competing for, you'll finally get a number 1 contenders match for the belt. Really is mind blowing considering the time this game came out, a much more complex and well polished take on a career mode compared to Warzone. You start out on house shows, and the more you win, not only do you move up the ranks, you start to compete on other television programs WWF ran at the time, like Shotgun Saturday Night, Sunday Night Heat, and Monday Night Raw. You'll see as soon as you start up a match that the quality has been improved massively. We finally get full entrances. By today's standards not that mind blowing I know, but this was huge for the time. Considering the next game in the series SmackDown barely had any entrances at all. This is a really nice and welcome feature to the franchise. Before a match begins, we no longer have commentators blowing smoke up the competitors' arses, but now have the wrestlers talking shit to each other.
I will destroy your body and claim your soul.
Again, another great touch that you really can't argue with. But now we must talk about the gameplay. On the build up to the release of this game, fans would get glimpses of what's to come through adverts. This is why I can't stand adverts for almost everything. It looks like it plays completely differently from Warzone, but it doesn't. It plays almost the exact same. It's still all about input and button combinations to pull off a single move. Same sluggish controls and same horrible hit detection at times. They did polish up a few things though. For a start, the matches don't drag on as much as they did in Warzone. Unlike in Warzone where your opponent's bar would change colour each time you drain them, in this, that's not the case. Just one bar you have to drain before being able to pull off your finishing move. Speaking of finishers, they now display the button combination to pull off your finisher in the moves list section in the pause menu, which they didn't do in Warzone. The wrestlers still say stuff during matches to taunt each other. Another cool thing they added was the ability to make your opponent bleed or yourself. Just make sure you turn the blood on in the options menu though beforehand. Also, when a match is finished, you are presented with a graph showing how well you performed and what moves you used the most to your advantage. Seeing as it pretty much plays the same as Warzone, there really isn't much else to say when it comes to gameplay, but visually there's been a massive improvement. The arenas look great, the ring itself looks better, and even the wrestlers themselves. Really easy to tell who's who if you were a fan at the time. When you aren't hauling ass in career mode, there are other match types you can compete in. There are a ton of new match types to choose from in this. You have a simple versus match which is straightforward, tag matches which for some reason I found to be a nightmare in this. The first tag match I had, I won because the timer ran out and I had dished the most damage out. You see, when you go to pin your opponent, their partner will come in and break up the pin. To counter this though, you can press L2 which will make your partner come in to try and stop this from happening. But D'Lo Brown wouldn't do jack shit. It wouldn't be until I got partnered with marvellous Mark Merrow of all people I'd win a match legitimately. You have a host of handicap matches to choose from. With the controls being as clunky as they are, these matches usually turn into nothing more than a first class mugging. You also have lumberjack matches, which is really just the same as a simple versus match but with superstars on the outside too who can drag you out of the ring and stomp a mud hole in your ass and leave you lifeless. There is a list of other matches too, with the Royal Rumble finally being included, which up to this point was only an exclusive to Warzone on the Nintendo 64 version. This game is really jam-packed with match types you can play. Sadly I can't speak about all of them or else we'd be here all day, but the customization for each match too is brilliant, so the different match types you can create really are endless. Along with there being a huge roster of superstars to choose from, many different match types which you can add your own stipulations to, there is also the ability to create and customize a lot in this game. If fans thought they got their balls blown away with the Create a Wrestler in Warzone, then they would never have been ready for this. The Create a Wrestler has had a massive overhaul and is very in depth, which if you're a fan of this kind of stuff, I'm sure you could find yourself lost for ages making something original, or you could just hit the random button and see what crazy creation the game throws at you. What the fuck? Along with Create a Wrestler, you can also create your own pay-per-view and make your own dream matches from the wrestlers to choose from. You can give it your own name, select whatever matches you want to see on it, and hell, if you're not happy with the arenas to choose from, you can create and customize your own. Now as I've said before, I didn't start playing these wrestling games proper until SmackDown, and when I would come to eventually play this back in the day, I did feel like this blew SmackDown right out of the water in terms of how deep you could go with the customization. Believe it or not, considering all the good points I pointed out with all the new features and stuff, and it basically playing the same as Warzone, it wasn't as highly praised as the previous game, which I find daft. Almost like adding all this new stuff never made it as good as Warzone. Just doesn't add up to me. I did enjoy going back to play this. Much like Warzone, if you take the time to get the controls down and find a superstar you can remember the movesets for, you can get lost in it for a while. But with that said, I don't think I can see myself going back to play this again. It's a nice little time capsule and a good reminder of how we got to where we are now with wrestling games, some for the good and bad I suppose. I would say this though, if you want to give this a bash but the controls put you off, definitely give WWE 13 a go. I got it for the Xbox 360 when it came out and was completely sold by the Showcase mode, which has you reliving the WWF Attitude years through gameplay. It puts you in matches from back then, has a ton of unlockables, and if you were a fan of that era I'm sure you'd enjoy this. But if you don't like the sound of that though, you can always play the Game Boy version that came out too. And that brings us to the end of part 2. Please subscribe to my channel to be kept up to date with future content I upload, but more importantly, stay tuned for part 3 where we're going to take a look at SmackDown 1 and 2. See you later.